And good evening, everyone. First of all, welcome Facebook users. Welcome Zoom users. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Cellar Angels Sip Tasting 21. 21 consecutive Fridays in a row. We have invaded your living rooms with exceptional wine, wonderful people, proving that just because we have to physically distance doesn't mean we have to socially distance. And tonight is no exception. We are coming to you live from a little heavenly hamlet right outside of Napa that has been graciously allowed by our next guest for week 21, Sue McNerney of Chanceux Winery. And the unfortunate thing, Sue, is you will learn that there are no edits like when we did the video several years ago. It's all live. But we're kind of excited about this because this has been a longtime favorite of all of the Cellar Angels and certainly all of our fans around the country because of the way you craft the wines, because of the special uniqueness of the terroir in Coombsville, which is right behind me, your vineyard. And let's get right into it. For those folks that are interested in learning how Cellar Angels does this, Cellar Angels is a direct-to-consumer online wine company in our 10th year of operation. And we feature small, limited production, often micro boutique wineries exclusively from Napa and Sonoma. So these are wines that you will seldom have the opportunity to acquire unless you are in the valley or on the winery's private mailing list. But we make them available through Cellar Angels because, as always, a portion of every single transaction goes to a charity you select. So with us tonight for week 21 is the one, the only Sue McNerney from Chanceux. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Martin, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you. It's been a long time.
It's been too long, and I'm going to take a sip. For anybody that is curious, Sue and I have been testing the technology all afternoon, and this is our fourth glass of wine. So, I don't actually remember how you and I first met, but I don't know if you were referred to us or if you filled out something on the website that said, I'm interested, but immediately after meeting and researching, we were captivated. And we were captivated by the fact that you are not a large producer. I mean, everything comes off, for the most part, for the first 7 or 8 years from this vineyard behind me, which is an acre of Cabernet. And for those folks that don't know a little bit about the story, go ahead and give us a little bit of an overview about how you got into this crazy business and why you're still so passionate about it.
Yeah, crazy for sure. My husband and I bought this property a little under 2 acres in 1999. We had a management company put in an acre of Cabernet grapes. We knew that Coombsville was known for Cabernet because of the little microclimates. So we went ahead and we had a vineyard put in between 1,800 and 1,900 grapes. So closely planted rows, closely planted vines to maximize what we could get off of that 1 acre. We did it with the intent of selling the fruit. We never planned on making wine as much as we loved to drink it. We had 3 young girls and we thought, you know what, we're not getting a horse. We're not doing, planting walnut trees or anything. Let's put in, this vineyard to enhance the home. So we did. And first year into it, 2005, third leaf, it was referred to. There was a glut in the market. We had only 1.5 tons. It was our first crop. So very low yield that first year. So I was trying to sell the grapes and there was a glut in the market. Nobody would take them.
Is that, now I have to go back in years, A, because I'm getting old, and B, some of these things escape me, but 5 was a huge vintage, if I recall correctly. There was a ton of wine.
There was. The normal yield off of this acre is about 4 tons, which yields about 200 cases. But in 2013 and 14, I got over 5 tons. Wow. Which was, you're not prepared for that. You're not prepared for that extra 2 barrels, that, extra 100 cases. But anyway, that was the start of our wine experience. And so we went ahead and made wine because we had nothing else to do with the fruit, and we weren't going to drop it. So
now how old were the girls?
the youngest was, Jen was almost 9.
Oh, so they were plenty old to work in the field then.
Right. Jen wanted a horse, and we said, no way. Yeah, I think in hindsight, we should have got the horse. But don't tell Jen that.
No.
Anyway, so we ended up making wine. Never intended, I guess you could call us the accidental vintners, because that was never our intent when we planted. But
Well, a couple things. I think it's interesting that you acquired land in Coombsville, because Coombsville obviously wasn't an AVA in 1999.
No.
So hats off to having the clairvoyancy to go ahead and look into a crystal ball and know what a special place that is. And before I go any further, welcome Brian Marcella, Caitlin Greasy, Jeff and Jane Greasy. By the way, Jeff and Jane Greasy haven't missed a single sip. This is 21 for them. Jim Brubaker from Colorado. Kim Vance is on. Kim Vance, who, when we started this 3 months ago or 5 months ago, she screamed she wanted to be on this show. We finally got her in next week. So Kim Vance, a winemaker as well. Nelson Holden, Scotland Kiefer from Chicago. Welcome very much, everyone. We're here tonight with Sue McNerney from Lake Chanceux, and she is telling us a little bit about how she decided to buy a vineyard in 1999, 2 acres of land. One of them planted to grapes, 3 daughters, wanted to make wine, didn't want to sell wine. And Stu, pick us up in 2005 when all of a sudden you've got a lot of wine on your hands and you realized we may have to start bottling.
Exactly. It was that or drop the fruit, and that wasn't an option. So we started taking classes, and I worked tirelessly with one vineyard manager. He and I, we did all the work, I mean, except for harvest. He and I would be out there every week. People don't realize how much work it is. When it's only 1 acre, you feel like it's doable. You don't need a crew. So Manuel and I, we would go out there throughout the season, starting in February, March, pruning, tying down, taking off twins, you name it. It's ongoing work. So I would do it with Manuel, and then when we needed something major, we would have a small crew come in. But it was a lot of work in between being a mom and a part-time photographer. So yeah, I hadn't signed up for a midlife third career, but it kind of fell in my lap. But
well, and just to give people a little bit of flavor, I mean, this is a neighborhood where Sue's house is, and this is one of those typical front yard, if you will, vineyard spots. It happens to be in Coombsville, which, as most of the Cellar Angels folks know, was a very recent addition to recognized AVAs, I believe in 2011. I can't believe it's already been 9 years, but it was a somewhat under the radar secret source for Cabernet for a lot of the big boys up valley that were sourcing their fruit here. This is actually Sue's house back here, tucked in behind the tree. This is our film crew's van, which we probably should have got out of the shop. But it's a special little place. And I think what's neat about it is it's one of those areas that you just can't advertise for tastings. You aren't open to the public. It's your home. So how do people get the opportunity outside of Cellar Angels to go ahead and sit down with you and taste your wine?
Well, there's a couple of ways. We're still battling, trying to help small farms like myself be able to do tastings. Unless you were grandfathered in decades ago, there's this winery up the road, and they literally don't have a tasting room. It's their picnic table outside. But they were grandfathered way decades ago, so they kind of got in under the wire. But as for myself, a couple of ways where I was doing production for the last 6 years. there was a tasting room. So when you're a small producer, such as I am, you have to actually tractor the fruit to a production facility because obviously there's nothing on site. So when you do that, and there's a tasting room, you're allowed to be part of that tasting room as one of the clients there. So I was able to do that for a number of years. And Salinas in North Napa.
Oh, sure.
29, that's where I did production for a good number of years.
So when you say, you would have to tractor fruit there,
Right.
It's not as if you could have a truck come and take all of the fruit. You actually had to tractor it to Salinas?
Well, let me backtrack. We used to do production at Ancien.
Okay.
Just up the road. We would tractor the fruit there because it wasn't worth getting a forklift truck and a flatbed.
Right.
When I moved to Salinas, you know, it's several miles away. If you'd have to have 10 tractors, you know, these guys are picking.
Right. Yeah.
So then we ended up getting a forklift and the half-ton picking bins and
Got it.
load up a truck. It just wasn't feasible to drive a tractor individually up there.
And just as a sidebar, Jeff and Jen Greasy, who I mentioned, haven't missed a single episode. They are very, very happy you discovered your third career.
Well, thank you. You know, I think the Greasies they live in Barrington, which I lived there for a good number of years.
They did not. I don't know if they knew that, but you are correct. They do live in Barrington, and they have been there. They have a beautiful parcel of land and are some of the most gracious people who had us out to dinner a month or so ago. But I did not know you lived in Barrington. I know you lived in the Chicago area, but I didn't know it was Barrington specific.
I was born and raised in Chicago, but as an older child, we moved out to the suburbs, and I went to Barrington High School, and great place to live.
Wow, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
So let me, actually, you know what I'll do? I'll show people where you are, because this will help explain so they get an idea of, can everybody see the Google Earth? Okay, good. Let's show Sue. This is actually a lot of people's favorite part, although we only have one Google Earth this evening, folks, so pay attention. Put the appetizers down.
Wow.
How about that?
Wow. That's awesome.
So it looks pretty neat from space, doesn't it?
It sure does.
So now this is the gorgeous home that if by some happenstance you find your way there because you're asking for directions and there might be a charcuterie tray out and a bottle of wine or three open, this is Sue's house. And I think it's interesting because, you know, this is suburbia, right? It's horse country to a degree, but you're not that far outside of Napa. You are, this is just a regular town road and a beautiful home, 2 acres, and then 1 acre planted to vines. And there's a couple, I guess, farmer vineyards in the area, but when I pull out, you can see how close you are to Napa.
Absolutely. 3 miles, little less than 3 miles west of downtown. So
yeah, due west. Or,
due west. Yeah. Yep.
And it's fascinating. Due east. Oh, well, Napa's due west of you, yeah. But I think it's fascinating. This has always blown me away when I come see you. Is you're in the city, and then within 2 miles you're in the country, and it's like 2 different completely worlds. I mean, it's
absolutely. It's farmland and vineyards here. No sidewalks, you know, no city utilities. So yeah, it's very cozy, rural. You know, my daughter mentioned something the other day. I was visiting her in Portland. She said, you know, Mom, it's a lot different for you. You have the property to walk around. You don't feel feel quite the impact as you do when you are in a residential neighborhood. And I never thought about that, but there is truth to that. You know, we're not seeing people walk with masks, or, you know, we're rural enough we can walk down the road and walk our pets and,
Right.
and not feel the intensity of it. So, yeah.
It's there's actually a lot of Barrington connections. I think Jim Brubaker has a Barrington connection. Jim's out in Colorado right now, but he's on the line.
Hi.
And his son's fiance, I think, is from Barrington. So it's amazing at such a, you know, it's not a 90,000 population suburb, but there's a lot of Barrington connections, which is fantastic. Let me also, for everyone that's just joining us, kind of revisit a couple of important topics. Late breaking news. Cellar Angels, we still have no wardrobe sponsor, so I'm again wearing a blue shirt because it looks good on camera. We have not heard from LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, or Mark Cuban about hosting an event for them, so we're a little bit disappointed in that capacity. But we are here this evening with Sue McNerney, and for those of you that are not drinking Sue's wine, here's how the people that are drinking Sue's wine in advance have done it. They've navigated over to the Cellar Angels website. They scroll down to the custom collection sip kit. Can you see that, Sue?
I do.
Okay. So this actually is what we are drinking from. It is 6 bottles of wine for the next 6 consecutive Friday nights. You get all 6 wines for under $300, and it allows you to participate. Sue's wine was one of the wines that was in this kit for the last 5 or 6 weeks. People around the country right now are drinking it because of that. And let's talk a little bit about this wine, because it is really kind of a special wine for a bunch of different reasons. Brian Marcella in Chicago is indicating that it's special because you signed his bottle.
Oh, that's great. You know, the first time somebody asked me to do that, it was years ago, and they were leaving, and they ran back in. They said, "Could you sign the bottles?" And I'm like, "Well, okay." It just kind of threw me off. But yeah, Brian.
That's when you know you've arrived.
Exactly. So
tell us about the 06.
The 06 was indeed a really special wine, partially because it was the very first vintage that we made. We had a dear friend who was a winemaker, and he guided us. So that first 2005 wine, that little 1.5 ton, we got about 120 cases, I think. We kind of fell on our face. We didn't know what we were doing. So in stepped a very good friend who was a winemaker, and he guided us. And so 2006 was our very first release. And it was a challenging year as we got into the farming of it. We got a little bit of bunch rot, botrytis, not good. Had to cut that out. The spring was wet. We had intense heat in the summer. But the thing with Coombsville is we have a long hang time. So things can kind of correct themselves, if you will, because we get that extended few weeks of hang time, unlike some of the other parts of the Napa Valley, like the floor, because of our little microclimates. So it ended up being a really good year. The berries were very small. I remember thinking they were the size of blueberries. You know, I was surprised how small they were. But the fruit was very concentrated. And we ended up making a very big cab, in such that it was very well structured. There were a lot of tannins at the time, a lot of fruit. Over the years, the tannins have just softened, and you know, we're drinking. This wine was bottled in 2008. So what is that, 12 years ago?
Yep.
Yeah, this has been in the bottle 12 years, and it is just amazing. We were so excited with this wine. I sent it in 2010 for my first competition. I sent it to New York International Finger Lakes Wine Competition, which was fairly new at the time. There were 3,500 submissions, international, around the world, and 42 wines within all categories. 42 wines got a double gold medal, which, if you don't, I'm sure you probably can guess, every wine taster judge had to give it a gold in order for it to be a double gold. If one would have rated it a silver, it would have been a gold. So somehow we got a double gold. 42 were awarded, and this little unknown, under 200 cases at the time, we got this award of double gold for this vintage. And so we were just really excited.
First of all, you're right. I mean, the International Finger Lake Wine Competition is world renowned now, and because the Finger Lake region produces some exceptional wines, but because New York is so international, it's attracting a lot of submissions. So out of 3,500, only 42 of them got double gold, and this was your first vintage.
Our first vintage. Yep.
How did you get notified of the award?
It's through mail. One day I get this package and there's this heavy metal in there, and I open it up and I said, Bob, you're not going to believe this. You know that competition I entered us in? And yeah, it was shocking.
That had to be just absolutely exhilarating.
It was. And it was a little bittersweet. That was the end of January. The competition was in the later part of the fall of 2009. So this was 2010 when we got notified. And Bob had just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So when we got that, I mean, he was just elated. It was something we never expected, and it really, really warmed his heart that, you know, we created this incredible wine by chance with the help of a friend and Mother Nature. So
yeah, Mother Nature certainly smiled upon you in that capacity. But I think it's just really one of those heartwarming stories where all you wanted to do was grow wine. You didn't want to bottle it, you didn't want to sell it, so you're kind of forced into that. So then, because of a glut in the market, no one needed wine, you decide you have to bottle it. You put a couple of the 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds to work, and begrudgingly let them earn their keep, which I'm sure is a lesson that they appreciate now, because they have their children of their own. And then you submit on a whim the inaugural vintage to a competition across the country. That's a fledgling competition, and then out of 3,500 entries, 42 of them are recognized with the highest award, double gold, and yours is one of them. Yep. It's a pretty special story.
Yeah, pretty incredible.
And so from there, did you realize, okay, well, we're pretty good at this winemaking thing?
You know, it's funny because there is a brand, Coombsville brand, and it's called Rocket Science, and you know, we'll often tease, making wine is not rocket science, but you have to have good fruit. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. So I did photography for years, worked with negatives long before digital. If you had a poor negative, it's really hard to make a good print from a poor negative. So the same thing relates to wine. If you have good grapes, you can make great wine with very little, you know, interference. Just stay on top of it, of course, and you know.
Well, I can appreciate the negative and photographic analogy from a standpoint of having developed my own film back in the day when SLR cameras were a thing.
Right.
And you're right, you would take an entire roll of 24 pictures trying to get one different shot. And then when you're in the dark room and you're playing with the print and the developer and everything, and it's not coming out very good.
And you're dodging and burning and trying to get a good print out of it. And
no, you have to start with a good negative. Tom Randall, hello, sir. Thank you for joining. And so 2007, 2008, 2009, you keep plowing ahead. You're still only making, 150 to 200 cases. And the property is spectacular. How did you decide on Cabernet?
When we moved here and we had this soil tested, we knew this was an area for Cab. Both of us were big red wine drinkers. And at the time I was really a Pinot Noir. And I said, can't we plant Pinot? And, Bob's like, no, I've researched it and this is Cab. Coombsville's known for Cab. So I said, okay. So we went ahead. By soil test and the microclimates here, Cabernet is by far what grew the best here. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Do you still have a penchant for Pinot, or are you a Cab girl?
I've kind of convert. I will drink anything red. Anything red. It's hard to pass on a red wine. But now I drink Cabernet almost every night, partially because I have a lot of shiners. It's my palate is just adapted to that big fruit, that bold structure. So
that's awesome. And I think it's great because, your wine is aged for 12 years and you're right. A lot of the tannins have softened. But when you are making a wine and planting in 1999 and 2000, you don't have any idea that your wine is going to be that age-worthy, because this still has a lot of power, a lot of finesse, a lot of depth, and it still has a lot of age potential on it.
It does. And every year is different, Martin. We had a 2007. It wasn't as big climate-wise. It wasn't as big of a year. The wine wasn't as big or structured.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of the last bottles the other day, and I'm still drinking well, but it's not the big, bold Cab. 2008 was, 2009 was the year of we were coming out of the recession, and it was a very different wine. We couldn't afford new French oak barrels, and we had always had 30% new French oak. And then we would buy throughout the valley from different wineries their 1-year Bordeaux barrels that they had put one vintage in. So that particular year, 09, part of it wasn't a big year. 08 was, 09 wasn't. We didn't have new French oak. And yet some people love the 09 even more so. Maybe they're not big on the oak. We try to never over oak.
Right.
My last winemaker said, I'm going to get you up to 100% new French oak. And I'm going, no, that's not going to happen. I can't afford 8 new barrels every year.
Well, I think it's interesting too that 07 was heralded by the media as just, one of those vintages of the century. And it doesn't have the staying power of the 08 or the 09 or the 6. So it's just fascinating that the experts don't always have it right. And there's great wine made every single vintage, but the 07 was heralded as like the greatest wine of the century or vintage of the century. And it's fascinating to see that some of them have fallen off. Let me do this because there's a lot of people itching to start betting their money again, because we have a poll question, Sue. And so now you can't answer these until we get to the end. So, and Barb Randall, hello to you as well. I don't want to leave the spouses out because they're the ones that make all the important decisions. So Sue is a self-professed Francophile. Sue's chosen name of Les Chanceux means take a chance, the lucky one. Sue in French translates to Sue in English. Sue, it helps if you don't laugh at the answers that are incorrect.
Sorry, it's just I use it as a password. See, I better change it now.
So if you're driving near Sue's house and you need to get on the Wi-Fi, it's all right. We've got
CEUX. Yep.
We'll give this 10 more seconds. I need a couple more people to vote. I see Mr. Greasy is usually 3 for 3. Let's see how he's doing this evening. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, it looks like we have some people that did some research this week.
Oh, wow.
So tell us how it does mean the lucky one. How did the name come about?
So the name came about, first of all, we had Cabernet planted, and we purchased, when we planted, not knowing we were going to make wine, but we got a premium rootstock. We bought a French rootstock. I'm a bit of a Francophile. I love all things French, you know, French cheese, French tulips, you name it. I love France. I've been there twice, spent some time. I love the country. I love the wines that come out of there. But I was a bit of a Francophile. So when we went to choose a name, McNerney Vineyard, I mean, you know, McNerney is just not a name that you put on a wine label. So it was a Bordeaux varietal. Mom's a bit of a Francophile. And Mom, when our 3 daughters were growing up, my mantra was, do you know how lucky you are for this? Do you know how lucky you are to have 2 sisters? Do you know how lucky you are to live here in the Napa Valley? It was kind of the family joke, you know, and by the time they were teenagers, I'd say, do you know? And they go, Mom, we know how lucky we are. So my girls, our 3 girls, went on the computer when we were brainstorming, what are we going to call this? And with those elements, the French rootstock, Mom being a Francophile, Mom always saying lucky, they were the ones that came up with La Chanceux, which is French for the lucky one. And it fit. It just, Bob says, that's it. You know, we got to name it that.
That is, and I think there's a couple great elements of that story. One, that it was all family that did it. 2, I think a very impressive aspect of it is that you instilled in your girls the appreciation and gratitude for how fortunate and lucky they are. And I think sometimes all of us take that for granted, that, you know, here we are in a global pandemic, and yet we can come together because of technology, because of our mutual admiration and love of wine. It's a pretty lucky thing. And then to have your girls have the innovation and creativity and ingenuity to say, hey, let's hop on the internet and see if we can assist Mom and come up with this. It's another magical story with regards to the entire process. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I might mention my girls are all older now. The youngest just turned 30, and they really do understand much more so today than 10, 15 years ago how lucky they are. And
it's amazing how smart Mom and Dad get as we get older, isn't it?
right, yeah, yeah.
So you branch out a little bit later, and you know, you've got the 2010s, you come out of the recession, you make the very shrewd economic decision, I'm not buying 8 French barrels every year. And then you decide in 2014 to switch winemakers, and you interview first 10 have an up and
cutting out on me.
Oh, I'm sorry. You interviewed an up and coming rising star as a winemaker, Jason Moore.
I did, yeah. You know, our friends helped us out in the early years, and he was phenomenal. After Bob passed away, I just hired a consultant. I didn't want to keep, you know, burdening my dear friend. So I hired a consultant for a couple of years, and then I met Jason in January of 2014. And I don't think Jason, I interviewed 3 different winemakers. I thought, you know, I need some more help with this. You know, I was afraid, gosh, what if something goes bad? I'm putting all this money into these barrels and storage and winemaking. I need to, you know, kind of step up and have somebody monitoring things, if you will. And so I met Jason, and I had interviewed 2 other winemakers, which were both very good choices. And then I met Jason, and I'm sure he won't mind my telling this little story of him. Yes, he was very up and coming winemaker. It's how I got introduced to him because he was interested in Coombsville fruit. So a friend of a friend, I was actually doing a tasting over at the Westin, and someone mentioned, oh, you know, there's this guy, Jason Moore. He loves Coombsville fruit. You know, he's kind of an up and coming winemaker. And so, okay, you know, so I contacted him, and we met, and Jason was so funny. First of all, he comes to the meeting in this muscle t-shirt, you know, very workout. I'm like, who comes to an interview like this? You know, I'm the age of his mother, so you know, it's like that. Anyway, that went over.
No, I understand.
Yeah, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, who is this guy? So I said, well, you know, how did you get into this? Did you go to school or whatever? And Jason's very laid back. He'll call it like it is, which is one of the things I really liked about him. He was not a polished winemaker, but he knew what he was talking about. He had been making wine for a number of years. But I said, well, how did you get into this? And he said, well, you know, I worked at La Toque when it was back in Rutherford. And he said, I learned about good wine, and I was just fascinated by it. And oh God, Jason, forgive me if I'm telling this story wrong. But anyway, he said he would study. He and his wife lived up in Angwin. He said he would live in his friend's kitchen at night, and he would help work at a vineyard. And he said he would study books and the science of it. He has a very scientific mind. He's very, very mathematical and good at that. And he said he got put in charge of production at a little winery up Valley. I go, well, how did you know what you were doing? He said, he looked right at me and said, I faked it till I got good at it. I said, I love it. I love that humility. And I said, okay, you're my guy. You're my guy.
Well, and it's interesting, and Jason may be upset with us. And for longtime Cellar Angels, you may recognize the name Jason Moore. Jason's own winery is called Modus Operandi, and we have featured Jason 3 times on Cellar Angels over the years, I think as early as 2011. And the story before he was even at La Toque, I find fascinating. And again, to your point, very humbling, to where he is from Fort Worth. So he has a big persona, opinion, lifestyle. He doesn't do anything. You're going to know Jason is in the room. He's got a great personality, and his wines also are of that ilk as well. But he describes the story as he was having some pillow talk with his wife one morning, and he has a passion for wine. He worked at a restaurant. He was doing real estate, and she goes, why don't you pursue the wine? Because you're obviously not very good at real estate. So he moved out to Napa, and the rest is history. And he became your winemaker in 2014. And then what was a couple of the first things he decided to do with you and with the wine and kind of the pathway?
You know, the first thing he said is, okay, something we had never done before. And I never could quite connect how it worked with our previous wines. We never did green drop. Okay. Was something I learned from Jason. So
why don't you tell people what green drop is?
Okay, so right now it's the beginning of August. We are going through veraison. So I would say we're about 75% of the way through. Veraison is when your Cabernet grapes go from green to purple and the sugar starts building in the grapes. So what happens is you have all these clusters hanging, and most of them go through veraison together. Within a week or so, you know, they all catch up, okay? And at some point, probably in the next week, everything out there is going to have finished veraison. It's going to be that deep, dark Cabernet purple grape. But you will have grapes that haven't caught up, that are still basically green bunches. And we never dropped them before, but I learned through Jason, it is common practice to go in and drop the green clusters now. with the idea that these purple clusters have already started building their sugar. They're much more advanced than these green clusters over here. These green clusters are never going to catch up to the fully the grapes that have gone through veraison. So you have a window there. You need to cut them off while they're green, because if you wait, of course, you're going to integrate them into your wine. And you may get a vegetative taste, if you will, because those grapes, those green clusters will, when you go to harvest in October, aren't going to really be quite up to par. Now, again, we didn't do it in the early years, and we made some pretty awesome vintages. So I never quite could understand that. I mean, I can taste a grape now close to harvest, and the seeds need to be brown. If the seeds are green, you're going to get that vegetative taste. How it worked out for us in the early years, I'm not quite sure.
Well, were you, and it does make sense scientifically, right? If you've got 6 clusters on the vine and one of them is green and never going to catch the other ones, all it's doing is stealing nutrient and water and energy from the other clusters. That much makes perfect sense. But when you only have 1 acre of grapes, and someone says, oh, we're going to start cutting fruit and dropping it on the ground, that had to be a little bit of soul-crushing revelation.
It was. Jason's there in 2014. He comes over with his pruners and he pulls them out. He starts cutting fruit off. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm dropping the green fruit. I go, Jason, you're killing me. You're cutting off quarter of my crop. First time we had ever done it, but I do understand it now. You know, when you make a premium wine, the one thing you want to do is get premium fruit. You know, just like when we go to production, we destem and we put it on a shaker table. So we take out any of those, you know, imperfect, if you will, for lack of a better word, fruit.
Right.
You want the premium fruit to go in to make the premium wine. So yeah, that was something I learned. Well,
yeah, that's a valuable lesson, and certainly, I think it's interesting too, because Jason also said you needed to expand your portfolio in 14.
He did. He did.
And what'd you decide on doing, and how'd you make that decision?
Well, the first one was rosé wine. We were at the shaker table harvesting the I believe it was the 14 Cabernet, and there were buckets under the shaker table and catching the juice, the free falling juice, you know.
Right.
And he said to me something, and it kind of went over my head. And he said, do you want to make rosé? And I said, Jason, I can't even sell the wine I have. Why would I make more? so he said, okay. He picks up the bucket of the free flowing juice and he says, you make rosé or you throw it away. And he goes and he tosses it. And I'm like, what? So I thought that was really odd. So the next year I said, what did you mean about that? And he says, well, we could make rosé wine out of this free falling juice, or, you know, we could batch some separately and make you rosé of Cabernet. I said, I had no idea last year. And when you said that, you went and dumped the bucket.
There can't be a lot of, I mean, I don't even remember what your total rosé production is. Kelly Downs, how are you? Thanks for joining. So how many cases of rosé do you make?
We started out with 25 and then we went to 50. But so then that first year in 2015, Jason says, after I questioned about the rosé and throwing away the buckets, he says, okay, you're such a Francophile. He says, here's what I think you should do. He said, you need to pizzage some grapes for your rosé. I go, pizzage? And he goes, you're going to foot stomp it. He says, you're a Francophile and you don't know what that is?
Literally, I was just about to ask that question.
Right. So we get to production and we had picked a certain lot for the rosé. The rosé wine, the bricks don't need to be quite as high as you want for cab, don't necessarily need to be that high in bricks. So we had picked out a lot and taken a half-ton bin. And when we got to production, while they were on the stems, I got in, washed my feet in a bucket, rolled my jeans up and got in and foot stomped. Crushed, Lucille Ball, imagine, hiking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a video out there somewhere of me doing that. And they were ice cold. Let me tell you, grapes, you pick them at the first sign of dawn, and they are cold in October.
Huh.
Yeah. My feet
That
weren't
is
red from the grapes, they were blue from the cold. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we laughed, and he says, you need to do that with the name like La Chanceux, you need to do this French process just for fun. And so we did that the following few years too, that we made rosé. So with that, Jason said, at the time, before the rosé, he says, you only have a Cabernet Sauvignon. He said, you need to be able to offer people more than just a premium cab. You're small, nobody's gonna find you. You need other varietals. So he talked me into it. So in 15, I said, okay. Jason would source his fruit from different parts of the Napa Valley. So he would get some really good Sauv Blanc from Rutherford. He says, why don't you go in on it with me, and we'll do 50 cases for you, and I'll make the rest under my label. And I said, okay, let's do that. So there's a little funny story about that. First year we were there, Jason was at the same production facility. Sorry, Jason.
Okay. It's just you and I, Sue. No one will see.
Yeah, right. Delete this part. So we're both at the same production facility, and the tasting room manager says to Jason, as he sees him, they are doing his client's wine, he says, wow, Sue McNerney's Sauv Blanc is kicking ass in the tasting room. I laughed so hard because we bottled it together, 50 cases under my label, and then the rest was.
Oh my goodness! I'm a big fan of that, and I'm gonna have to come back and grab some of your Sauv Blanc. Right now, I'm gonna do our second poll because.
Okay.
So let me do this. That. All right. Everyone, put your glasses down. Get your hands on your computers. This is a speed round. Oh, and an important first break for La Chanceux was winning double gold at the Finger Lakes Wine Competition. Surprise discovery by Matt Kramer of Wine Spectator on being blown away by her Cabernet. Selling thousands of dollars during a children's autism event in Alabama. Now there's a potential that the judges will throw this question out as a trick question. And there is no inquiries. All sales are final. All answers are final. So we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to share the results. A little slice of all of them. And I think an important distinction was how it was worded in the quotations, an important first break. But might not all these things happen. Why don't you, you told us the story about the double gold, only 42 entries received this distinction out of 3,500 total entries. But I also was pleased to discover later on, what Matt Kramer said from Wine Spectator. And then also the thrill and exhilaration you had in participating in the children's charity. So talk to us a little bit about Wine Spectator. It's, for those of you that don't know it, Wine Spectator is a magazine. It's done okay. We'll probably be around for a while. But talk to us, and Matt Kramer is a phenomenal writer and a phenomenal palate, so I don't want to take anything away from Matt, but he discovered your wine how?
So in 2012, as part of the Coombsville Vintners and Growers, I was a member, and we were at one of our quarterly meetings, and Lauren Ackerman was
Sure.
on the board at the Jackson Hole, Wyoming
Hmm.
fundraiser for music for children. And she said, you know, I'm going to put this out there. If anyone wants to, I'm going to put this out there. If you would like to be part of this charitable event, you know, let me know, because they're only taking like a dozen people. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. I'll go. I signed up. Sign me up. I'll go. I had no clue what I was doing, what I was getting involved in, had no clue. But I needed to get myself out there, and it was a charitable cause, and anything with children, children are near and dear to my heart. So I'm always happy to give what I can to children's charities. So I go to Jackson Hole, which I'd never been to, and it's a 3-day event full of very high-end shindigs, as Matt Kramer would say. And so the first one is Women in Wine. So there were 12 of us in this beautiful hall, and it was a high-end tasting. I mean, I had a backdrop, looked like I owned, you know, 10,000 acres behind me with La Chanceux, that times 100. And everybody's buzzing, like, you know, talking about someone. And I was embarrassed to say I did not know who. I didn't get Wine Spectator, of course, you know, I read the magazines here and there. But I didn't know who Matt Kramer was. But there was this buzz around, you know, they're talking about this high-end person's going to be there. And I didn't hear the name. But I'm waiting for the event to begin. And I'm there at my table I actually had the 2006 and the 2008 with me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm waiting for it to begin, you know, and I mean, this very high-end fashion, jewelry, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But there's an older gentleman by the back door just kind of hanging around. And, you know, I'm very chatty and sociable. And I go, hi, you know, I'm Sue McNerney from La Chanceux. And he looks at me and goes, I know who you are. I know more about you than you probably want me to know. And I'm like, excuse me? So long story short, he looks at me after we chatted for about 10 minutes. He looks at me and he says, you do know who I am, don't you? And I go, I'm really sorry, I don't. I said, I'm like the bottom rung of the ladder here, and I just don't know names in the wine industry. He goes, well, I'm Matt Kramer with Wine Spectator. And it was a pleasure to meet him. And he became my biggest advocate. He's like, introduced me as, you know, there's this small vintner here, 200 cases, Sue McNerney, and, you know, gets on the microphone, he introduces everyone. Long story short, he helped me through that 3-day event. Sent people to my table, couloir, we went up to couloir, the tram that goes up to the restaurant, sent everyone there, actually managed my table so I could go get something to eat. And it was so funny, the last day of the event, it was a white tent, black tie event. Wow. I show up in my cocktail dress and orchestra's playing, black tie, and this woman yells from about 10 feet away, Sue McNerney, Matt Kramer's looking for you. And the heads just turned. You could just almost hear people go, who the hell is she? It was so funny. But Matt was a big help. He said,
I'm a little bit like you. If I'm in a crowded room and I hear the name Kramer, I'm thinking Seinfeld. So I don't know, I would never have been thinking Matt, but you were at a wine event, you know, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is just about as idyllic and beautiful place on earth as there is.
Oh, it was gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah. If you could have seen people turn when she said Matt Kramer is looking for you, it was funny. So Matt gave me a signed copy of his book, and his wife Karen was there. She's lovely. And Matt said, leave me a couple of bottles of your 08, will you? And I said, oh, absolutely. I'll leave them at the concierge where I'm staying. So he picked them up. I go home the next day, and 2 days later, I get a call from Quint's Restaurant in San Francisco. And they said, Sue McNerney, we'd like to get some of your 2008 Cabernet. And I go, oh, well, that's great. I said, would you like me to come do a tasting? And they go, no, Matt Kramer says we need it on our wine list, and that's good enough for us. So,
Wow. Wow. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
it was fun. I ended up being on the wine list there for 3 years, did the America's Cup. They had an event there, and they actually featured my 2008 wine for that event. So that was a lot of fun. Thanks to Matt, and he wrote a little article. It ain't got a thing if it don't have that zing, and it was in reference to my 2008 cab. So that was very fun.
Well, it's fascinating because over the years, I mean, we owned a retail wine store, and we did very similar to what you just described, probably hundreds of different tastings. And with Cellar Angels, now for 10 years, we travel around the country. We do tastings when you could travel, and you could be in groups of more than family members. And you just don't know who's going to be in the audience. You don't know where it's going to lead. You don't know how you're going to meet that next customer. And you have to continually give it your all every single time. And I think that's in addition to what you described earlier, as far as people really don't know how difficult and laborious this job is, growing vines and pruning the vines and doing that. But there's also the sales and marketing side,
Absolutely.
which is extremely difficult and very time consuming. So when you have an audience like that, and granted, there are some events where you're like, yes, sign me up. And those events in Jackson Hole or the Ritz-Carlton in Naples and the Food and Wine Auction in Aspen, there's a couple good ones that you definitely want to be a part of. But hats off to Laura Ackerman and recognizing you and the talents and skills and the quality of the juice that you produce to say, hey, you should do this. And it gets back to, do you know how lucky you are? Because you, paying it forward and having a special place in your heart for children, wanted to do everything you could to help out this cause. And lo and behold, it led to some really, really great things. So that's really a testament to you and everything that you've strived for and basically produced. And it warms our heart to be able to share those stories. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you. So.
You decided, because you're that type of person, that you wanted to do something special for the Cellar Angels audience this evening. And I tried to not show it earlier when we looked at the website, so hopefully no one was paying attention. But why don't you talk a little bit about what you wanted to put together for them?
So tonight on Cellar Angels, we have the last of my 2006 library wine, which we're offering. Martin, is that on there? Somewhere, there we go. Yes.
Yep. The 06 is on there. Oh, by the way, hey, that might be you.
That might be it.
But yes, we have the 06, which is your inaugural wine, the double gold medal winner. And it's the last of the 06 that's available. And it's, as the folks that are drinking it, it's just a special wine. So, but I also want to talk to folks about a vertical that you said, let's do this.
Okay.
So what wines did you pick and why did you pick them?
So the vertical is the 2012, 13, and 14. All a little bit different, but premium, all award-winning wines. Those are the first sequence that I have. My wines are older vintages because of a life situation and things that happen. So I do have older wines. Most of these would be library wines in anyone else's tasting room. I'm fortunate to have these. It's awesome to do them in a vertical because you can see the variables in the different vintages. So yeah, we just wanted to come up with a special offering for Cellar Angels and their guests and club members, and give you a little bigger taste of the wines that come off this property. It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon in these bottles. but each year is a little bit different than the other. So it's kind of a fun way to taste and compare, share.
Do you have, and first of all, thank you, because everything you said resonates with us because we love vertical tastings. Love, 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 love. Because you're right, when you're a small producer, there is vintage variation, which is something to marvel at and something to appreciate. And none of us were the same last year or the year before or the year prior to that. So the wine shouldn't be either. And you don't get any vintage variation in mass produced wine. So it is really neat to see and taste what Mother Nature has done. But of these, is there one of them that is particular? I mean, also, by the way, all of these wines were made by Jason Moore. So that's also kind of special. Is there any of these that you say, that one kind of sings to me personally, or that one kind of like, I don't want to have you pick your favorite child, but if you were to pick any of these three, what would you think?
Oh, Martin, you know, it never fails when I'm out somewhere doing a tasting and I have a couple of different vintages with me. People ask that, which one's your favorite? And to me, this is what I will tell you. This is what I tell my three daughters as they've gotten older, and they tease about how this one was able to do this one I couldn't do that, but okay. So there was a line in a movie years ago, and I equate this to wine. I love you all equally, but it's impossible to love you the same. And I hope that goes true with my different vintages.
So I think your fourth career, you will be running for office, because that level of diplomacy is exactly what's needed today.
Right. And you know, you can't, your mind can only say, oh my God, this is the best meal I've ever had, or the best wine I've ever had. But when you do that, you can have many, many, many wines that you drink and say, oh my God, that was so good. How do you pick a favorite? So I can't honestly answer that. They're all awesome, award-winning. I submit all of our wines go to international competitions just to get that recognition. Little too small to put out there to the
Well, let me, it's kind of funny. It is an impossible question to answer. And there are, I mean, and each one is different, right? I mean, the vintages are completely different because Mother Nature was completely different. And the irony that I love about wine is, hypothetically, you could say, you know, the 13, I wasn't terrifically fond of the 13. And then 4 or 5 years later, all of a sudden the 13 has developed, and the awkwardness or the angularity is now softened a little bit. And so the wine evolves. And that, I think, is one of the neat things, because when you go back and revisit things, you're like, oh, wow, that is actually turning out to be really something special. But it does get to our final poll question. And Fresh Family, who was with us this evening, says they have enjoyed everything you've produced. So that is good. So everyone get your answer keys ready for the last question of the evening. One of the most important lessons I've learned over the last 20 years, earthquakes and fires were never part of any SWOT analysis. I'm continually amazed at the kindness of others. Time is precious. Share great wine with great people. Still got about 2 people left. Well, those answering. She referenced earlier Save the Family Farms, because that is an organization that we support and is vital to helping people like Sue be able to have a tasting room as a micro producer, so that they don't have to play by the rules of the 50,000 case producers. So, all right, 3, 2, 1. What that you've learned over the last 20 years, one of the most important things?
I say share. Time is precious. I've learned that the hard way 10 years ago when I lost my husband at a young age. And you know what? I don't save the good wine for put it in cellar. I drink it. I drink it every day because every day is a gift. It's not a given. It's just not. So enjoy life. Share what you have with others. You know, we all have different gifts. We're all given perhaps different opportunities. But share what you can, share what you have. If it's kindness, share that. You know, I'm fortunate I have a beautiful property and I can share some of that with charities and so forth. So just give what you can and enjoy life and don't take it for granted because we are all so very lucky. Truly.
We are, you're absolutely right. And I don't think anybody can say it better. We are indeed the lucky ones. And all of us at Cellar Angels are very, very lucky to have you share what you've done with us. And we are humbled by it. We are inspired by it. We can't wait to see you again. And as we say every single week, be good to one another. We are all in this together. This too shall pass, as the saying goes. And one day, hopefully very, very soon, we will be able to hoist a glass together. I definitely want to try the rosé. The Sauv Blanc is out of this world. Next week, we are thrilled, as I mentioned earlier, to welcome Kim Vance of Zoetic Wines for week 22. So everyone, enjoy your weekend. Be good to one another. And like Sue said, open up the good stuff.
Absolutely. Cheers, Marty.
Thanks so much, Sue. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.